Hello and welcome back, and thank you for joining us today, this morning for Adam, today for me. I've got Adam Sikes with me, who he's written a book or two. Got an impressive history with the U.S. Marines. Fantastic. What do they call it? Is it a record? Are they going to call it with the CIA, or is it just a career, or what's? Is there an official term? I can't think of one.
Hey, good morning, Gavin. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I think time or career or experience, something like that. Maybe a record. I'm not sure. But that sounds like I've been in jail or something.
Yeah, that's why I went to say that, an impressive record. And I was thinking back to when the old 201 files, what everybody had, like the personnel files. But are they still going now, or are they completely out the window and it's all digital like the rest of the world?
I don't know. It's been a while since I've been back there.
No worries. Yeah. So I noticed as well. I'm gonna hit on something here because I actually had a conversation with somebody the other day, and I was talking about you, and I said you're paramilitary in the CIA, and they said, "What's paramilitary?" And I said, in a sentence, the bit where most people fail. So for those who don't know the difference between an analyst, who is nothing like a paramilitary officer, can you kind of give us the difference for people who are still on the learning curve?
Yeah, and for those who want to check it out, you go to CIA.gov and it explains all these things as well. But the CIA has these different jobs, and one of them is analytical. And so they're looking for folks who have very strong academic backgrounds in certain fields, perhaps languages, perhaps they've done a few things in their life that have given them an expertise in a specific subject matter, and they're going to go to the CIA and they're going to study, research, and analyze this stuff to provide that type of information to the U.S. government's decision makers. Whereas paramilitary, although I did some analytical work for a time when I was at the agency as a paramilitary officer. The role of a paramilitary officer is to do military-like functions, but you're just not in uniform. And so I think the definition of the career on the website is to perform military-type operations in the ground, air, or sea, and to do these in austere and non-permissive environments, perform covert action on behalf of the U.S. government. So it's military-like actions, but you're not in uniform, so to speak.
Yeah, love it. That sounded so professional when you put it. Yeah, when you almost. I bet you if I went to the site, it'd probably be verbatim. You know,
you've probably been told. Yeah, I've probably been coached on how to say that.
Yeah. So now the first book, if I've got this right, was the Underhanded. Is that right?
That was the second one. Yeah,
that was the second. Right.
That was my second book. Yeah.
Got it written in the right order then. So Landslide was with Mason Hackett.
Yeah. And that was I started writing that back in 2017.
Oh wow.
And so started writing that in 2017, and that came out of a conversation with my book agent at the time. And essentially I'd written a couple manuscripts which had landed me this agent that I had back then, but we hadn't snagged the publisher yet.
Okay.
He says, Adam, you're a decent writer, but I think what we really need to do is you've got all this experience, you've got 25 years that you were either in the Marine Corps, or you were the agency. You need to really write something personal, or write something that really digs into all those dark and interesting places that you don't want to write about. So I need you to write about that. So we worked on that for a couple of years. That's Landslide, and that is based off a number of experiences I had that I've refashioned and reshaped for fiction. But that was the first book that came out, which I'm desperately trying to finish the sequel right now. And I've probably been saying this for the past month. I'm desperately trying to finish this book. And I'm looking at my task list on how to finish the sequel to this book. And it's really short. I just need like 3 or 4 sessions of 4 hours and I'll be able to finish this thing, but I can't get to it. It just
it's like a pregnancy, isn't it? For women that say the last 2 weeks is always the longest. It must be the same. I've done it myself. When you go to a book and you think you've finished and you think, I've just got to alter that one bit, right. Or you're doing your last read throughs. It can be a nightmare. Yeah. Well, so all the dark places. So in a way, then, has this been kind of therapeutic for you, writing about some of the kind of the places that you normally lock away and compartmentalize?
I didn't go into writing thinking it was going to be therapeutic. I didn't wake up one morning and said, man, I've got all these nightmares. I've got all these traumas. I got to find some way to fix myself. That didn't happen. It was more, I was looking at, what I'd done in my life over the years and what I was good at. And I'd spent a lot of time, 25 years, and I was good at this national security arena. I'd been in uniform with the Marine Corps, had a couple tours in Iraq, I'd been in Bosnia in the 90s. And then with the agency, I'd been to some other garden spots too that I'm never going to vacation. And so I had done a lot of these things, and it was great experiences and great times, but a lot of them were kind of rough. Just to put it simply, they were not these pleasant experiences. So I was trying to think about, what do I really enjoy doing? What do I like doing? What are the things that, make me happy? And I think some people, they get the adage that, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. Well, I was getting to the point where I felt like all I was doing was working. I'm like, so what can I do that would, I really enjoy and that I would do whether I'm paid or not?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so this was something I went through 10, 12 years ago. I know, probably 14 years now. And I started thinking, well, I love reading. I love spending times in books. So in those 14 years, I went back to graduate school. I got and my graduate, did some graduate work for history, and I did a few other things, but I really embraced writing. And what's happened is, and I can't claim credit for this sentence. I heard someone else say it, but it's essentially, I enjoy writing and find that in fiction, I'm able to grapple with and explore all the crap and the nonsense that I've experienced in life. And it's trying to make sense of it. And so that's where I think the therapeutic element comes from.
Yeah, I can understand that. And and I should imagine going from the industry that you've worked in to, I know obviously you're a keen reader anyway, but for example, when I first was I was pretty much talked into writing. It was my mother-in-law said, "Go on, give it a go. You can tell a good story, just tell it on paper." So I give it a shot, and I wrote out what I thought was a great manuscript, and I sent it to her, and I said, "What do you think?" And she said, "This isn't a book." She said, "This is a report." Yeah,
Yeah.
she said, you got to put in emotions and smells and all the five senses and this and description. And I'm like, yeah, but that's what happened. She said, no. The reader doesn't want to know what happened. They want to know all the other bits around
Right.
what happened. I'm like, that's going to be a bit more difficult than I thought. So I take all these classes because you've probably written that many of them. You've lost count, but you have to kind of give the bottom line up front and kind of all the
Oh yeah.
facts only, and that's it. So there's nothing opinion and no shades of grey.
It's a completely different type of writing, and there is a complexity. There's an art form, I think, to fiction, because you're right. All the professional writing I did, either in the Marine Corps or at the agency, it was very stripped down. It was just like you said, it's bottom line on top, your bottom line up front, however you want to phrase it, and then you are including the most critical information in those first few sentences that you can, because people are going to stop reading it at some point, and you got to make sure you get that important stuff out really fast. Or same way with academic writing, it's a very structured format, because other academics or other readers who are interested in that subject, they're usually accustomed to a certain type of form when it comes to academic and historical writing. And so when you're having to read 10 500-page tomes, sometimes it gets, and you got to do it in a week, you can't really read every word. So you've got to know where to look inside those books to get the critical information. But with fiction, it's a completely different story. You're hiding the main point because you want somebody to keep reading and looking. So
Exactly.
you've disguised it, and you've taken them down this road and this road and this road, and you're trying to use language that just keeps them turning the pages. But yeah, you've disguised that bottom line somewhere. It's it is down there in the bottom somewhere.
Oh yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, and of course this to me it was all alien, because I took like a master class with a few big authors, like Dan Brown and whatever, and he was saying build all the way up to the action, and just before the action's about to start, you stop. I'm like, that's not heavy, So I had to, everything I knew had to be turned upside down on its head, and I'm like, it was about, like you say, not dragging it out, but building it up and building it up and building it up, and then when you're just about to hit the action, you stop. So it's like the next chapter, they want to flick on and carry on reading to find out what happened. So I'm kind of getting the hang of it now finally. But yeah, it was a transition.
Yeah, definitely. I remember because I took some creative writing classes when I was in high school,
Mhm.
but I didn't during my undergraduate or graduate work. I didn't take any creative writing stuff, so
Mm.
I kind of started in the dark. And then it took
Yeah.
me a few years to figure out, say, Adam, you need some help. So, I eventually, worked with a developmental editor to get some of that immediate feedback right away as I was going. But
Yeah.
I probably wrote the first scene I ever wrote is for a manuscript. It's for a story that I spent a ton of time researching, really enjoyed it. Fortunately, that manuscript as it is will never be published because it was just horrendous. But that first scene, and again, but I really like the story. So some year I'm going to go back and really tune it up. But that first scene, I probably rewrote that first scene 40 times over the next 6 months. I just kept going back and working it and playing with it and then scratching out and going back with it. And I just had a good time trying to figure out how to make it sound interesting because you're right. There's this buildup that you're trying to crescendo to. And I would think back to when I was a little kid around the campfire or something. What were the stories that you would sit there and listen to? It's because somebody had a way with language and suspense that they could just keep you on the edge of your seat and you're wondering what's going to happen. And I was
Mm.
trying to do that with writing. And we'll see. We'll see what
Oh
happens.
yeah, it's a challenge because you've got to kind of grip them in. Because every I learned. I can't remember whose class it was I was doing, but they were saying like the cover is to make you look at the title. The title is to make you kind of flip it over and read the back. The back is to make you take it to the checkout and buy it, and then you've got to literally from the beginning, from the first page, you've got to get them wanting to know what's going on and getting involved, kind of thing. And I remember I wrote this when we were doing like the practices for these master classes. And I started off, and it was simply I started with one word: nothing, absolutely nothing. Then something, just a little something in the darkness somewhere. And it was kind of and by the end of it was like, yeah, that's more like it. You've got them kind of what's going on here. And it was brilliant how it kind of built up. But then once you've got their attention, you've then got to keep it, and that's the hardest part. So I mean, for me, doing the classes, it was really beneficial.
That perspective right there. I wish I'd been taking notes about how you said yet the cover is how you get them to look at the title. And the title is how do you get them to look at the back cover. I'm going to write that down. I hadn't heard that before, but that is so true.
Yeah.
Even I think digitally, your title and your cover is so important because that's what's going to make people stop their endless scroll. Just check out your book because I still walk into bookstores and I love walking into bookstores, and whether they're an independent bookstore in a small little shop somewhere or whether they're, a massive Barnes and Noble, I like to be able to walk in and I will admit that if the cover doesn't stop my eye or the writing or the font or something, I'm going to glance over it because there's so much out there I'm looking for. So you got to have something that catches that reader's eye.
If you look on mine, I don't know if you can see that very well. The Unforgiven Spy. I've had the book cover put on my a little bit of shameless promotion while I'm having my cup of tea. But
my copy arrived yesterday, by the way.
I
wish I had it accessible. Otherwise, I'd show it up.
No, what I did, I put the word spy really big because apparently there's 14,000 people a month around. I think it's around the US walk into a bookstore and ask for any book with the word spy in the title. I thought, okay, I'll have to remember that. So that was, So a lot of the things I do a lot of research before I kind of, put it all together, and I'm still failing. So I don't know what you're going to do to get it right. But yeah, no, I can't remember where I learned that, but it is literally, if the cover grabs your attention, then the next thing you're going to do is read the title. If the title sounds intriguing enough to kind of make you go, well, what's that about then? Then you flip it over and read the back, and then reading the back that's what makes your potential reader take it to the checkout or not. And I know because I've done it many times. I've picked it up, and sometimes I've read the back and gone, oh no, it's so. And other times I've kind of half my mind up just looking at the cover and the title. I thought, oh, I'm buying that, and I've read the back just to confirm I've made the right decision. So
yeah. Well, I think the back summary is also really important because you
Mhm.
essentially have 30 seconds to make a reader stop and
Yeah.
read that. And if you can't convey the critical points of your book, of what it's about in 30 seconds, that's going to attract a reader and interest them.
Mhm.
You know, you're exactly right. They're gonna flip it and put it back down and go on to something else. And I'm not sure who the famous person who said it was. It says, "I would have written you a shorter letter if I'd had the time." It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard to take all these things. I mean, you got a 300, 400, 500 page book, and you're trying to summarize it in 5 or 6
Mhm.
sentences.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of stuff you got to cram in there. I mean, what are the themes and the issues that you're covering in your book? And sometimes you're not even thinking about that when you're writing it. What is the theme of my book? Well, I'm writing a spy fiction, so it's about lies, manipulation, and all the nasty stuff.
Mhm.
But you can't put that in your summary. Like, what else are you trying to explore?
Well, I mean, I think it was one of the publishing companies that spoke to me when they were on about that back cover. They said, "Make me care about the character." So nobody gives a shit about the, pardon the French. Nobody cares about the plot, right? People
Yeah.
don't care where it is or what's going. What they want to do, they want to fall in love with the character that ultimately they know he's gonna save the day, but they want to know how and why they should care for him. And so it's like Mason Hackett. All right, why should I fall in love with Mason Hackett? What's going to make me want to find out whether he does the right thing or not? And so I thought that's a really interesting perspective, and I'm going to go back to that actually on book number 3, and go back to trying to get the reader to concentrate on the main characters rather than the storyline.
You,
Get them
you
to.
know, I have that same thing. I have to remind myself all the time of like, why would a reader care about your character? Like, what
Mhm.
about him or her, whether they're the main character or a secondary character or even the villain?
Yeah,
Why is a
yeah.
reader going to be interested in this person? Because I do, when I'm thinking about a story and I'm a plotter, I
Mm.
outline my manuscripts. I spend a lot of time thinking about the intricacies of the plot. What's
Mhm.
happening? What's the conspiracy? What are the characters going to find themselves doing? And I always have to catch myself and go back and say, well, why would anybody care about this character doing these things?
Mm.
And what I found was, like I said, when I wrote a manuscript and was told that, hey, this is not good at all. I eventually found my way to an editor, and I had the very fortunate experience to work with Richard Merrick, who was the editor for Robert Ludlum.
Oh, wow.
And I found him. I just felt very fortunate that I'd found him,
Mhm.
and he agreed to work with me for about a year, and I paid him to. That's what editors do. You got to compensate them for
Yeah.
their time. But I
Very
just found it.
considerate of them.
Yeah, I know. I know. Why would they want to eat anything? I mean, I got to pay a mortgage. Come on.
I've got a
Um,
basement here.
yeah, but I felt very. Now he passed away a few years ago, but I am indebted to him for that year that I spent going back and forth with him. We never met, but I always felt like when I was talking to him on the phone that he
Mhm.
was probably drinking a martini and having a cigarette up there in Connecticut as we're talking about this story. And he just pounded into me every time we spoke. Why do I care about your characters? What's going on here? And that was one thing. He says, you got to create some type of empathy or connection or some
Mm.
reason that your characters are going to be just feel invested in learning about this individual. If he's too good, he's too perfect, well, then nobody cares. But if
Yeah.
he's too destroyed and if he's too problematic, they're not going to want to read him because he's going to depress them. So you got to
Mhm.
find this median line of
Yeah.
somebody who's got strength as well as weakness and vulnerability and
Mm.
interesting quirks. And you got to form all this stuff together. And now you got to make it all up and said, oh man, that's kind of tough.
Yeah. I get that because what was that film with Will Smith a few years ago? Yeah, where he's with his son on the bus and he's trying to make it. And do you know the one I'm on about?
I know exactly. Oh yeah, they were homeless for a time,
Yeah, that's the
and then
one.
he
Yeah.
goes on to um, become very wealthy and working in the financial district. And
Mhm.
one of the scenes I remember is him with a Rubik's cube in the back of a car.
Mm.
What was that? Yeah, that was a good movie. I forget the name of it though. I saw it. It was
Me
very
too.
good.
But the point is, the guy was so nice. I mean, he was like overly nice to
Yeah,
the point where you were like, okay, I'm glad he's made it. But it's kind of, I don't know. When they say women never fall for nice guys. You can kind of see why his wife left him. Sorry, Will, or
Too
whichever
nice.
character. He was too nice, and of course there are lots of kind of if your character, if you're trying to make them kind of too nice, crossing old ladies over the road and volunteering for it and all the other things, and then people are like, ugh, they get a bit like kind of sickly with it. And at the same time, like you say, you've got to find that level of broke but repairable kind of, you don't want them so broke that they're just a disaster, but got to get that, give them that bit of hope that this guy might be able to make it at the end in one piece.
You gotta give him some rough edges, and I tried to do that with Mason Hackett in Landslide. He had a number of rough edges. He had a number of issues that he was grappling with, and I wrote it in first person because I think the only way to get at some of those issues that I was writing about was that you had to tell it from his perspective, because the type of individual he is, he's not going to bare his soul. He's not going to meet somebody on the street and tell him about all the trauma that's happened in his life that gives him the motivation now to try to go save his friend who's in Ukraine and find himself in this CIA, Russian Federation conspiracy. He's not going to bare his soul to say, well, I had this trauma when I was a young child because my father didn't like me, and then I joined the Marine Corps and all this bad stuff happened. He's not going to do that. So I had to tell it, I think, in first person to kind of get some of those things out. Same with the second one, with the Underhanded too. He's got these traumas that they reveal themselves later in the book, through conversation with the characters that he's kind of juxtaposed against and going through life with. And again, that main character is William Dresden, and he's had some challenges too as a history professor. And some people might think, well, what could a professor, what are the major challenges they've had, or traumas? And so I stuck him, or he's inspired by a real professor that I studied under when I was at university. We happened to be the same age, so we became friends. This professor friend and I, and we would get beers and stuff. And what I learned was that the same time I was in the Marine Corps in the greater Balkan area, he was working in orphanages, trying to help orphans in Bosnia as well, working with an NGO back then. And then he eventually found his way into academia. But I thought, wow, that is a great background right there. Here you are, this tenured professor, and you're working here at this university, in this, in the ivory tower. Yet you had this experience a couple decades ago where you were in there in one of the most horrific conflicts, of the 20th century, trying to help children without parents and stuff, what they were going to do. And that was pretty impressive to me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of it's weird because intelligence officers, the best intelligence officers apparently have all had trauma within their life, and it has to be. Again, it's a scale that you got to be right on the line. Not enough trauma, and you're not going to be good enough. Too much trauma, you're not going to be good enough. You have just the right amount of trauma makes you kind of good enough at the job to be able to kind of smile and carry on.
I think that's the interview process. It's like, how broken are you? Are you really broken or just halfway broken? And then I think it's true because I mean, this from your background as well. Working in the intelligence world, it's not like we're trying to go out and meet people that have had perfect lives and that are saints and that are going to have kindness written on their headstone when they pass away. These are people that we're trying to get to know and get connected with that probably have something shady or less than affable about them. And then how do you connect with that individual? How do you work with them?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've explained that too. Some people. Sometimes I have the occasional. I might come across as cynical, and I'll be out with my wife or something, and she'll go off to walk, and I'll go, no, wait, give it 5 minutes. She's like, why? Just let me. And then 5 minutes later there'll be a fight break out or something, and she'll say, how do you know that's going to happen? I'm saying, look, years of like kind of dealing with some of the most horrible people on the planet, has got me enough experience to know, be able to even just sense an atmosphere, and so it is understandable why a lot of intelligence officers end up drinking or kind of going insane, because we got to. I think most of them end up either becoming alcoholics or writers. So
sometimes both.
Yeah, sometimes both. Yeah, I got to admit, I stopped drinking this August. I'll have stopped drinking 3 years because I was
Oh, wonderful.
I was heavy on the old Russian stuff. I was having like a liter a night of vodka, not every night, but most, straight out the bottle. And I got really, really heavy on it. And in the end, I thought, right, I'm gonna have to cut this right down and just, maybe do it over a weekend. So I did that to start with, but then my weekends, they started getting longer and starting earlier. And so in the end, I said, right, okay, it's all or nothing. And that was it. I stopped completely and haven't touched a drop since. So
congratulations! I bet you're sleeping better.
Yeah, a lot better, to be fair, and a lot of other things as well, which you don't kind of realize so much until you've stopped, and then but it's kind of weird because it's the only drug in the world where, I mean, you can get heroin addicts, for example. If one of them gets clean, they'll turn around and go, yeah, well done, you go for it. I'm so glad, stay away from this stuff. It's ruined our lives and blah, blah, blah. You can get any kind of drug in the world, and anybody else who if they get clean, they'll say, yeah, keep away from this stuff. You come off alcohol, and it's the only drug in the world where all your mates will go, have one won't hurt, join us, come on. The peer pressure for alcohol is unbelievable. I mean, it doesn't bother me, but it's surprising. It's it's like, the whole, when they say misery loves company, it's a bit like that. It's almost like the kind of, we don't want you to be free. Come and suffer with us, have a drink.
Screw your sleep up, have your blood sugar rise and all these other things right there. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I still, I'll still have a drink now and again, but I know what you mean. I mean, if you're out at a social gathering, especially people from your past where you may have, had alcohol involved previously, it is just like, oh, just have one, you'll be fine. Don't worry, don't just have one to celebrate. It's an occasion. But yeah, when you cut back, and I've cut back in recent years too, and it was more because I found myself that if I had a drop of alcohol after 7 p.m., I couldn't sleep, and I'd be tossed and turned. I'm like, something's going on here. So maybe I'm just old. My body doesn't want to deal with it anymore. But I've significantly cut back because I just know how much it's going to mess up my sleep and a handful of other things. So I still enjoy having a glass of wine at dinner, but I'll look at my watch and say, okay, if it's 7 o'clock, kid, I can't do it. Can't have it. But yeah.
I was going to say, I had one little caveat actually to that. When I say I haven't touched a drop in the last 3 years, that's a slight lie. I went down to Kent to deliver a training course for a close protection company there. And I don't know whether it was a bit of escape and evasion, a bit of tradecraft and covert method of entry, that kind of thing. It was more fun than actually, training. I was just teaching the lads as a bit of a treat. And while I was down there, the CEO of the company, I get on well with him. He's a great laugh. We met up. We hadn't seen each other for a couple of years, and we met up. And I told him, like, the hotel where I'm staying in, there's a bar here. Come along. And so we went there. All the people on the training course are all there drinking. And so I said, okay, I'll come and join you for a beer. So we went round the back to the bar. He orders himself a beer. He said, what do you want? I said, oh, no. I said, I don't drink. I said, I'll just have a lemonade. He said, no, I don't drink. He says, no, I've ordered a beer because I thought you were drinking. He says, so if I don't drink and I'm drinking, then you don't drink and you're drinking as well. So what you having? So I ended up with a Corona, bottle of Corona. And we ended up, the pair of us almost trolleyed on one drink, but it was a fun night. So that was the only exception that I said, okay, on this occasion I will, purely because you don't and I don't. We both kind of talked each other into it.
There we go. Well, going back to what you said about, when sometimes when you're out with your wife and you say, wait a second, there is something to be said to that. It's experience and instincts. And those are things you can't necessarily train or teach somebody. I think, there's certain types of people. I think there's certain type of people that gravitate to certain types of work. People who are good with numbers, or they like building things, or like figuring out problems, might find themselves in the engineer or sciences community or something like that. And people who want to, can look at a blank wall or whatever it is. They might find themselves in the artistic community or things like that, or people who enjoy it, have much more patience and a bigger heart than I do, might find themselves in teaching or something, working with kids or stuff like that. I think with the intelligence community, there is an element of it's instinctual and there's experiences. You have to have this, basic social skills and engagement that you can teach some of it. I mean, you're definitely getting trained in the intelligence community on how to lie, manipulate, steal, and work with people. And you got to get them to like you, because nobody's going to do this bad stuff if they don't like you.
Exactly.
So there's got to be some of that, and then it's experience over time. I know in the paramilitary community where I was working, it wasn't just could you shoot, could you move, could you communicate, could you dive, could you jump. It wasn't just that. You had to be operated at tier 1 special operations level.
Yeah.
But a huge part of our assessment process was, can you perform as a case officer in this human world? And if you are belt fed and you're the ramrod straight, and you only view the world through the scope of a rifle, you're not going to be good in that paramilitary world, because you have to have that intelligence acumen, not intelligence, but you have to have that human intelligence perspective.
Yeah.
And some of that can be trained, but some of it is also your experience and your instincts. So being able to look at a situation, because I've done the same thing. I've been walking around and I've looked at my family and said, we're just going to wait a second. And they're like, why? Why don't we keep it? It's like, just hold on a second. We're going to let this develop, and we're safe over here. And then sure enough, maybe there's a car accident or something else potentially threatening or really threatening occurs. So yeah, we're going to walk the other direction now. Folks.
Yeah.
Let's get out of here. And you just kind of see this stuff developing.
And it's crazy, because sometimes people they'll kind of ask you, how did you know? And it's kind of like, you can just, it's like a spidey sense more so than a like you say, a teachable skill. You just kind of look around and you think something's not right. There's something,
There's
that
something
doesn't
on the
add
air.
up in this. And I suppose, and I'm like that with a lot of things. I approach a lot of things with an air of caution. Also, a lot of people, if I'm meeting people for the first time, and like I say, I've had wife, friends, family members have turned around and said, "Oh, don't you think they're great?" I'm like, not sure yet. I haven't got quite to know enough about them. I'll let you know very soon. But so far, I'd say just keep them at arm's length.
Something a little off with that person. I'm not sure if we're going to trust them
yet. Give it a few more drinks and we'll see where we're going. I noticed in your book, your character goes across Czech Republic, Romania, and Ukraine, and I was going to ask whether this is something that you've been out to these places to do research, or whether it's something you're writing from experience with the countries you've been to, or whether it's some authors cheat and go on Google, and I find that's never quite the same.
So for both my novels, I have been to every location except for 3 spots, which I'm not going to reveal. But otherwise, all the locations that I went to, both in Landslide and the Underhanded, that I go to in the book, I've physically been there. Now, sometimes, you would know this from your past life as well, that sometimes it was a very brief amount of time. I mean, some of these places that I describe in the book, or even in real life, I was only on the ground for a couple hours or maybe a couple days. And some of the places I lived for an extended period of time. I lived in Moscow for a year when I was in the Marine Corps from 2000. I went there in January of 2000 and then left in January of 2001. I lived there for a year as the Marines, as a Marine security guard, working at the embassy there. And it was a fascinating time.
I'll bet.
Because not anymore. And really not even back then.
Right.
I could get by at on the street, and I could get by at a restaurant in a very basic conversational tone, but I couldn't have a conversation of substance in Russian.
Okay.
But I went to Portugal after that. I spent 2 years there, and when I did leave there, I was fairly fluent. Again, it's atrophied now because I haven't used it in over 20 years. But when I was in Russia, it was an interesting time because the wall had fell in '89, and the Soviet Union had broken up, and then had all the turmoil of the '90s, and Putin had just come to power. And folks who were around back then and remember it, there was a lot of optimism about the Russian Federation back then. And Clinton came to visit while I was there. The director of the FBI, Louis Freeh, Madeleine Albright, all these major U.S. administration leaders came to Russia during that year, including Clinton. And the sentiment was very positive that Putin was going to be someone to work with and modernizing for the country and a few other things. And this was also a time where we were allowed to fraternize or go off of the embassy grounds and engage with the local population. And it was a wild year, and I had a great time, but it's completely different than what it is now. I mean, now, the Russian Federation and Putin, they are not our friends. The Russian government is not our friends. And it's complete. And a good friend of mine went back 10 years later. He was there with me with the FBI at the time, and then he went back a number of years later to be the head of the legal attaché there. And it was completely different from what our experiences were in 2000. He said it was like night and day back in the Cold War. And it was that type of interaction.
Wow. Yeah, I was there a while ago, just before. Well, I was in Eastern Ukraine. I'd gone over to Ukraine with my brother. We went to go to Chernobyl. We did the whole Chernobyl thing, and I didn't realize, like, kind of, when you talk about Chernobyl, people think about the disaster in the power plant, and they think that's it. And there's actually 152 towns, villages, and cities within the exclusion zone. And some of them, to this day, you can't go in. They're too radioactive to go near. Some of it you can go into, some of the places you can visit, but it's absolutely crazy. And I remember them saying, like, don't go into like the buildings or the hotels or anything, because if you go in, that sometimes you get the bears and whatever, and they've been getting whatever they can from within other, whether it's food or drinks and that kind of thing. I thought, that'll be just my luck. I'll be on the third floor and going and piss off some drunk, hungover radioactive bear that's going to come clawing at me. But and the other thing, they said, don't stroke the dogs either, because the dogs have got that used to the radiation. The dogs themselves are actually radioactive, and it's parts of it held in the fur or something. And whether this is true or not, I don't know, but I thought, bloody hell, that's amazing. So, the dogs have been breeding with the wolves, and and they're all, there's nothing, they're all wild, but they do come up to you, and they don't, like, I got probably 2 or 3 feet away from one. It wasn't snarling or anything. It actually looked really friendly, probably just wanted food. But I took the advice of the people who were there, saying, like, don't stroke them, don't mess, So, but went over to Russia while I was there, and had a little bit of fun in Russia while I was over there, to an old military installation. So,
that's wild.
But I definitely recommend it. It's I don't think you can at the minute. I think the Russians have just took it back, haven't they?
I think there's a war going on. Yeah.
There was something on the news that I took no notice of, but I think because they started off taking Chernobyl, and I think maybe just a guess, but it might have something to do with 100 trillion gallons of crude oil that's underneath it that they thought they'd never be able to use, and now all of a sudden they've gone, okay, hang on, people can go in there now.
I think there's some resource extraction going on. I think somehow money is connected to at least an element of that dance party that's happening over there.
Without a doubt.
Which is just I'm very glad that the aid packages have been approved. That's at least from our government that's going to be going through.
Yeah, I'm going to have a conversation with you off the air and to talk to you about a couple of little bits. So in the meantime, I'm going to get back to books before I end up getting myself into trouble. You said you were an avid reader, so were there any of the readers that, like, kind of, throughout your kind of career or growing up, that you looked at who went, this is like my default, no matter what he writes, you buy his or her book, and kind of that really inspired you?
Yeah, So I grew up reading from an early childhood, and I can tell you exactly where I was sitting sometimes reading certain books, where I was introduced to an author for the first time. Stephen King, one of the
Mm,
great thriller horror writers of all time, if not the greatest.
mm,
The first book I picked up of Stephen King was called The Eyes of the Dragon, which he wrote for a younger audience. He wrote
mm,
it for his son,
mm,
designed for a younger, and I had no idea. And this was a fantasy book. There's dragons in there and all kinds of other stuff. That was the first book I read
mm.
of Stephen King. And I remember I was living outside Boston at the time, outside Boston, Massachusetts, and we were in our house. And I know the chair I was in, I was reading in. And I thought, wow, this is an amazing author. And I can't wait to read the rest of his stuff. And I think I was in elementary school. And then I went to the library, public library, and I picked up another one of his books. And it was not meant for kids at all.
I had a feeling I knew where this was going.
But Stephen King is one of those brilliant writers to me
Yeah.
that his language and his storytelling is just amazing. And I just keep reading. And he can write a 1,000-page book, and I'm just going to read through it.
Yeah.
But Robert Ludlum, I mentioned him earlier, and I remember when I first read the Bourne Identity, the first book of the Bourne trilogy, where I was, and we were living outside Chicago at that point. And so for me, like folks like Stephen King, although I don't write horror, the way he develops characters, is something that's really inspired me. And Robert Ludlum, I've read all his books, and I read all his books. I would bring them with me when I was in the Marine Corps. I had a box or an ammo crate, this steel ammo crate that I would carry with me that would be full of his books that I would take with me on deployments when I was going overseas to read his books. And then folks like Steve Berry and Brad Meltzer and James Rollins and Dan Brown, I've really enjoyed how they write these conspiracies that they'll connect with history. And they'll take it out of the real world. I love that they write their stories out of the real world. That's got nothing to do with current events whatsoever. But they tell these masterful stories. And then, when I got older, I started reading things like Hemingway and Graham Greene and Steinbeck and all these others. And of course, I read John le Carré and all these other masters that are out there. And so all of them, whenever they come out with a new book or I find a book of theirs that I haven't read before, I'm usually snatching it up. But now I spend a lot of time reading authors that are either up and coming or I haven't encountered before, and trying to read as much as I can across the field, because there's a significant amount of tremendous writing, tremendous storytelling out there that has never been hailed, #1 bestseller on the New York Times list. But these are brilliant writers with masterful stories. So I'm really enjoying that now, being in the author community, finding these like yourself, finding someone like yourself who we've only been reading for a couple of years, but tell these brilliant stories. And you're telling it from this perspective. It's like, oh, he really does know what that smells like or what that felt like in his hand that he described. And it just pulls you in and you can't wait to read another one. So those are the authors that I'm really enjoying now.
I think for me, my favorite of all time was probably when you mentioned Dan Brown. I think Dan Brown's Inferno. I think that I don't know what it was about that book, but it just left everything else I was reading, a disappointment afterwards. So it was really great. I like your concept as well, because very much like you, I tend to, if I've written about a place, whether it's a city or a town or anything, I've kept the continuity 100% in my books, and I've been there. And it's a nightmare because there's certain things, especially in the one I've just done, The Burning Spy. I mentioned a bar, and it closed down 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago after the COVID problems, and I was like, oh, really? So and it's nice when I kind of mention these places, and either somebody goes, oh, I went there because I read it in your book or whatever. So so it's disappointing when you find these places are shut down or gone.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a train station in Tours, France, and I lived in Tours for about 3 months doing some language immersion years ago.
Wow.
To learn French. But the train station there, I've been there a number of times, because although Tours is a beautiful city and all kinds of stuff to do, I would take excursions out of the train station. And where I was living was would have been east of where the train station was. But that's one of those places that in Underhanded with my second book that I described the actual train station itself, and I knew where some of the they're not hidden, but the less well-known ins and outs and exits and entrances of that train station. I use them in the story. So I hope the train station doesn't close, because that would really be bad for the city population. But if you ever go there and you read the book, you can find these secret entrances into the train station.
Well, you know what? I'm going to have to get that just now. Just to I'm not trying to think. Yeah, book number 1 of mine. You'll see the extent of my French. The amount of comments I've had. And I even said it the once I was on an interview with Robin Dreek, and he said, "So do you speak any French?" I said, "My French consists of cul-de-sac, menage a trois, and croissant."
Those are important things.
Yeah, they're the only ones I know. So yeah, no, I used to be reasonable at French. And that's because we did it by default in high school anyway. And I remember the little bits, and I spent a little bit of time learning it because I used to go to Belgium a lot, and it was mainly work related. So I'd be in Belgium 2 or 3 times a week, and it was a perfect little meeting point for people coming from other bigger countries, shall we say, where we could kind of link up. Exactly. And of course it was great. Now I remember I used to go there, and it was a total waste of time learning any French, even because Belgian is its own language, even though a lot of French is spoken there. But everybody pretty much spoke English anyway. So it didn't do me any favors. The one time I'd been practicing for ages to ask for a coffee, I spent forever practicing it throughout the day. I thought, I've got to get this right. And I went into a little cafe where we'd stopped on the road, and I walked in. I thought, this will do nicely. And I walked up and I said to the guy, "Je voudrais un café au lait, s'il vous plaît." I felt dead proud of myself because I said a bit of French. And he looked at me and went, "You what, mate?" Oh, just give me a coffee, will you?
That's how they want to travel around, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna use the language, and I'm gonna come here and do this. It's like, so you want a coffee? Yeah. Yes, I would love a coffee.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna ask, do you find you still enjoy, or did you ever enjoy traveling? Because I think a lot of times intelligence officers, there's got to be a travel bug in you somewhere, because you're all focused internationally. I mean, do you find now after your career that you still enjoy traveling, or is it different for you?
No, I love it. I absolutely love it. I mean, I went out to the first time I ever went out to the States, I'd got nothing booked, no hotels, no nothing. We just got to the hotel, got to the hotel, landed in the airport, rented a car, and hit Route 66, and went right away along. And there's some really, really fantastic memories on Route 66 that I have. But you know what disappointed me more than anything is that it's not one long road anymore. And I didn't realize that. It's kind of, there's a dot here and a bit there, and there's a longer bit there, and then a couple of little bits. So to do it, you have to kind of keep getting on and off the freeway and back onto Route 66. And then I did the longest part, which I think goes from like Arizona-ish and ends, somewhere in Hollywood's basement somewhere along the line, and and that was like the longest bit, but it was brilliant. Absolutely loved it. And we no hotels booked. We just stopped wherever when I got tired. We were like, find a motel, pull in, and that'll do. And that to me was fantastic. Some of the memories on there. I remember I was in a convertible Camaro, and
going along. You had too much fun. Yeah.
Oh, I was loving it. Route 66, 55 mile an hour. Honestly, and on this long straight, and this beautiful American eagle is flying alongside me at the exact amount of time. I've got some typical anthem blasting on the stereo. I can't remember what it was, but it was something like "White Snake, Here We Go Again" or something. Typical. And I thought, life just doesn't get better than this. It just really doesn't. And that was something. And I kept on saying to my wife, who was with me at the time, "Get the camera. You've got to get a video or shot of this eagle flying next to us while we're doing this." And she was just so in awe. She was just like, "No." She's just watching it. It was just one of them moments where it's like, no, I'm not going to waste this moment trying to search for it.
Don't ruin it with the picture.
Yeah, so yeah, and that memory, and just traveling in general, I love traveling anyway, and I'm one of those people. You probably find yourself does a similar kind of thing. You go to a foreign country and you go, right, where do all the tourists go? And they say over there. You go, brilliant. I'm not going anywhere near that. What's that way?
What's over there?
Yeah,
Exactly.
where don't they speak English? Where can I get an actual meal that is from this country? Where can I get some authentic? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I still love traveling. And I don't get to do it as much. I got my wife, and we got 2 little kids right now. So making overseas travel can be a bit more of a challenge, especially with the long flights and stuff like that. But they're going to get to the age soon where we can do it again. But yeah, I do the same thing. If I'm in an area and all the tourists, I see all the people flocking to one area, it's like, yeah, I am not going that way. We're going to go over here. But I love going into local restaurants and saying, and asking them, and asking the owner, or asking the waiter, or the server, the waitress, what do you recommend? Just, it is your choice. You can order the best thing on the menu. What do you recommend? And I've tried and enjoyed some of the most amazing food, because rather than trying to think about what I like, I've relied on something. Hey, what's the local dish, or what are you really good at here? And had some really tasty stuff, and I've also had some stuff that I'm probably never going to try again. But at least I did it. Yeah.
Yeah. I've had some of the meals I've had. I've been too scared to ask what's in it and what meat this is, But I'm enjoying it. Let's leave it at that. I love that, and of course, it's good when you get to a country or somewhere where, like, even though they're using English, you can't understand thing on the menu. You've got they're all laid out pretty much the same. That's the starter, that's the dessert. So and if there's no English translation, or even if there is, going for the ones you've never heard of, or asking like, what's this? Tell me a little bit about this. And I love it. And some of the most beautiful dishes I've ever had, the most exotic dishes, I still to this day couldn't tell you what the name of them are.
Oh yeah. It's amazing food. Yeah, I've also had those experiences where either Afghanistan or Iraq or some of these other places where I have eaten some food there that I am not sure what it was, and I do not ever want to know what we were eating, because I'm not sure.
Yeah, I remember I had the Afghani chicken, which when I come back to England, I was with a friend from Bangladesh, and he said, no, that Afghani, they stole that off us. That's actually North Indian chicken. I'm like, oh, okay. So all right, no worries. Whatever. And then, so it was a while later, and I was speaking to some other guy who was a chef, and he said, oh, not North Indian chicken. He said, that's South Indian chicken. They stole that from us. Like, okay. And then when I was speaking to a guy from Afghanistan, he said, bloody Indians, they stole that from us. So I thought, brilliant, I've got a great way to wind all of them up now whenever I speak to them and talk about the Afghan chicken. So yeah,
I've been very fortunate, though, of all the eating. I've only gotten really bad sick twice, and I knew it was coming too. After I had the meal, I said, "Oh yeah, this is not going to work out well." And but that's happened to me twice, and it laid me up. I got really sick once too as well.
I've done that a couple of times, and I remember, like, one of the, because I noticed you were talking about Romania as well. I remember going to Romania, and I was there for 4 days, and it was a quick, nice and simple job, and I'd got it done within a day, which was great. So I had 3 days playtime, and and I took I think it was about, and I'm trying to remember, probably about 250 British pounds equivalent, which was something like about 3,500 Romanian leu. And I remember going over there with this like 3,500 Romanian leu, thinking, I mean, it was like a wedge like this, all these different plastic, because we're one of the first countries to have the plastic bills, and when we landed, I thought, okay, I've got to work out the equivalence of what everything is. And I remember going for a meal and thinking, I'll just have a bite to eat and get sorted. And I remember changing up this, like I say, 2,500 quid to get about 3,500 leu, and thinking, so probably a meal, we're probably looking several hundred of these Romanian leu. And I sat down, and I didn't have a starter, I had a main course and a couple of drinks. I don't even think I had a dessert. I might have done. And they said, do you want the bill? I said, yeah. And they brought it over, and it said 12. I'm like, what, 12,000? I don't know, 1,200, and 12 Romanian leu. It's like, yeah, I'm like, looks like I might be able to stay a bit longer than I thought. You're kidding me? I couldn't believe it. I mean, it's a little bit different now. It started to all level off a little bit around Europe, but yeah, I come back. I think, like I said, to about 3,600 Romanian leu with me. I had the time of my life on my 3 days of playtime. And come back with 3,100 and something. So I'm like, wow. Yeah, I thought I'd be going there again.
Something similar happened with me and my brother. I've got 3 younger brothers, and the one right below me was also, it still does a lot of work internationally. But this was, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. He and I we'd never backpacked in Europe. And so we were going to do a trip. Now, we were both older at the time. We were both, in our late 20s, early 30s when we were doing this. So we also had real jobs. So we didn't have to stay in the hostels or anything like that.
Yeah,
a little bit of ability to have a nicer stay. But our goal was, we started in Paris, and we wanted to get as far east as we could, and then make it back to where we need to on time to catch our flight home. So we got all the way to Budapest, Hungary, which is where we're going. And the trains, part of the story is the difference in trains from where we started with the TGV and the bullet trains in France. And, how we got there. We ended up going through Belgium, and we ended up coming back down through Germany and a few other places, and we get through Austria, and we get all the way to Budapest. But the trains changed in their models and styles to bear. By the time we got to the end, it was one of these older trains where I'm thinking Dr. Zhivago was going to come out of one of the cars or something like that. And they were more wooden, and I mean, it was still fast and everything, but the construction of the train had considerably changed. And when we stepped out of the train station in Budapest, Hungary, neither of us had ever been there before. And Hungary is a beautiful, magnificent country, but it still has the remnants of the Soviet era. And so you have these massive monolithic concrete buildings that when you step out of that train station, you look around on this big square, you see these huge, what you would think of were built during the Soviet times when they were packing people into these small, very small apartments and things like that. You have these massive buildings, but it's contrasted with the beauty of Budapest, from the stuff going back, decades and the centuries of all this great architecture that was built. And we did the same thing. We would go into restaurants, and we were not paying what we thought we were going to pay for a magnificent meal with some wine made from grapes that I'd never heard of. And we just had the best time for the 2.5 days that we were there. It was amazing.
Oh yeah, you just on about the train changes as well. Reminded me. Have a look at my Facebook later, or I'll see if I'll send you the picture. I remember we landed. Where would we go? We landed in Geneva, in Switzerland. We spent a few nights in Switzerland, and we had to get a train from Switzerland through all the Swiss Alps into Italy. And there was one change in a place called Domodossola, and I remember thinking we were going from Domodossola then on to Milan. And I remember going the Swiss train station, marble floors and just, it was like a mall more than a train station. It was beautiful, and all the banister rails all highly polished, and everything was so clean and immaculate. And when we got to this train, I mean, it was such a modern, like, kind of, it's almost undescribable, silvers and greys and everything else, and you get in it, and it's like being inside a modern jet, And I thought, wow. And I remember that the precision goes beyond their watches, because when the time on the platform clock from 59 to 00, the train pulled off, and I was like, wow, they're precise in everything they do, huh? And the kind of this train pulled off, and we're going nice and smooth all through these beautiful bits of countryside. And then we get to this place, this Domodossola, and I've never been to Domodossola before, but if you can imagine, like, about 6 tracks one side, 6 tracks the other, and in the middle is what could be described only as a shack. And the only reason it was standing is because it couldn't be bothered to fall down. And we get off the train, and like kind of, the Swiss train heads back that way, and there's these carriages over there. They're absolutely wrecked. Some of them had got windows, graffiti all over them, the lot. And I'm like, okay, this is the change, So there's no platforms, no ticket booths, no nothing, just this little shack where they're serving espressos and one or two other things. So I've gone in and grabbed a coffee. I thought, I think I'm going to need it. And I drank this coffee, and I said, "Where's the train from Domodossola to Milan?" And she goes, "That's it. That one with the chickens." She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, would I be able to get a carriage with a roof? Let me see your ticket." No. Okay, seats. Yeah, if you're lucky. Oh dear. And we got onto this thing. There isn't even an engine at the time. We had to wait for the engine to come link up and take this thing away. And I remember the creaking and clanging that it made as it's pulling away. I'm thinking, I hope we're going to make it. Oh, bloody hell. And it pulled into Milan, and it looked lost because there's all these beautiful trains, and we got onto the. But yeah, it was the two next to each other. I took a photo of the Swiss train, then took a photo of this thing from Domodossola, and I put them, one from Geneva to Domodossola, one from Domodossola to Milan, on one single photo, and the amount of people that cracked up laughing at it was unbelievable.
Oh yeah, that's hilarious.
But this is it, and you've probably got, very similar to me, so many stories from travel, because the things that happen on the road and the stories you get from traveling around. I don't. Have you found the same thing over the years?
Yeah, I'm finding that I don't have enough time to write all the stories that I want to write. So, I think all writers, we always keep some type of notebook or some type of note-taking capability with us at all times, whether you're using the iPad or the tablet, or if you're old-fashioned like me with a pen or something like that. I'm always got, exactly. I've always got, I've got mine right here, and I've got my notebook that I carry with me everywhere I go. But I'm always writing down story ideas, because something will happen, or I'll remember something, and then I'll just kind of sketch it out, because I don't want to forget it, because I've probably forgotten more of the stories and the good lines than I've been able to remember. So now I make sure anytime something happens, even if I'm driving, I pulled over sometimes, because I said, you know what, I have got a great, it's just me in the car, and maybe I'm listening to music, and I'm just in the very good creative state. And I will pull over and stop and write down whatever it is I've been thinking through at that moment, because I know if I wait another 20 minutes or an hour, I'm going to forget it.
Yeah.
Same thing at bedtime. I know that they talk about that all the time, when you have the great idea for the story and you fall asleep and you can't remember what it was. It's the same idea. And I do it when I'm running, because I find myself very creative when I'm moving. And I'm a runner. So I intentionally go out now, and I'm like, man, I'm trying to figure this scene out, or I'm trying to figure this dialogue out. I'm going to go for a run, and I'll go for a run, and I'm able to think through it, but then I'll stop mid-run or mid-uphill or whatever it is, catch my breath. But I'm also on my phone, because I'll have my phone with me, and I'll write down the notes so I don't forget what it is that I figured out or had the epiphany.
It's amazing how the creative juices always get flowing at the most inconvenient of times. When you're in the shower, when anything like that. And it really is the case. I've sent text messages to myself. I've done all sorts of things to try and keep notes of, like, kind of, the like you say, these moments, because the biggest lie we tell ourselves is, I'll remember that when I get home, and I'll write that down somewhere.
No. I've learned that my memory doesn't work like that anymore.
It doesn't matter how great it is. By the time you actually, and the other thing is you'll have all these great moments, and you'll think, right, tomorrow I'm going to spend an hour dedicated to nothing but writing. So you have all these thoughts about what you're going to put in, then you'll sit in front of the computer and you'll go,
yeah. I've had that before. Although I will say, I've never, knock on wood, I've never had writer's block. I've never not been able to put something down. I think that's because Hemingway had a line that he says, no matter what happened the day or the night before, get up every morning and bite on the nail, meaning get up and do your work. And so now, if I find myself stuck, I just start doing free writing, where it may have nothing to do with the story I'm writing, but I'm just starting to type. And eventually that cracks something loose, and I will then be able to get back into and focus on the writing that I actually need to work on. But I'll break free from that, or I go for the run, and I'll get the creative juices going then, and then I'll be able to sit down and hopefully not have the I'm stuck moment.
Yeah. Well, I do exactly the same thing, and you'll like this. You'll like where I go with this. I change the font color to red, right?
Oh.
And what I do is I go, you stupid plonker, you can't think of anything to write, so let's just start writing something anyway, because you want to get onto the story about where this happens with that, and then before you know it, I will be like kind of back into the flow of it again. And all of a sudden I go, yes, I'm black. And that's when, and I'm like, yeah, I can change the font color. And I think of it as, you know, when you're doing an SDR and you're looking forward to being completely black, even though you never be 100% convinced. You're at that point.
You think yourself, yeah,
that's it. And it's kind of a similar feeling, that because it makes me think back to that, and then I'll go back and I'll highlight all the red and I'll go delete. Ha! Did you?
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Yeah. I'm gonna have to try that.
and of course, the other thing is if ever you're really in the moment where you just kind of, you think, I can't stop now, I've just got to keep going, and I've had those, where I've just written and just can't stop. It's easy to scroll back and find that bit. If it's all in red, you just scroll back and go, there it is, rather than trying to, so that's what I do. That's my little thing, my little writer's block get around. So tip for the week. You heard it here first, guys.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. You should write a book about that.
I know, yeah. Well, you know what? I'm aware I've taken up over an hour, and I'm aware, obviously time is very valuable to you. So I'm going to kind of end it here and say thank you. For everybody who doesn't know where to find you, you're on all the social media sites. Do you have a website, anything like that?
I do, yeah. I'm on Instagram, I'm on X, I'm on Threads, I'm on Facebook, and just adamsikes.com. So Adam Sikes, S-I-K-E-S, not with the Y, not a Oliver Twist, but adamsikes.com. You can find me. And Gavin, this was amazing. Sincerely enjoyed this conversation. It was a great way to start my day. So thank you so much for having me on and being able to chat.
Oh, thank you for joining me. And and for those who don't know, this was just like catching up with an old friend, really, more so than the usual show. It was enjoyable. Thank you.